Hello everyone, here we are, the lecture video. I'm a big fan of this film. Hope all of you enjoy it as well. It's Parasite by the director Bong Joon-ho. Again, I think it's a fantastic film. It's a 2019 film, and it's already considered one of the greatest films of all time on a lot of people's lists. It's a pretty interesting film, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. 2019 South Korean film, I just mentioned that. It's a black comedy thriller, so that's a lot going on. There's actually some satire as well, if you really were to look at it. Some people call it a satirical comedy or in certain ways, so we'll look at that a little bit later. But black comedy thriller, which means it's dark. It's got some very outrageous, kind of darker look in a comedic way at a situation that plays out in the movie. And again, it turns into a kind of a thriller, which is pretty interesting. We haven't watched a film like this before. It premiered at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival, and it won the Palme d'Or, which is the highest award that any film can get at that particular film festival. It was the best overall movie in 2019 at that film festival. The title Parasite has kind of a dual meaning, right? There's one family that's the poorer family, the Kim family, and they infiltrate the rich family in kind of a deceitful way. And so you could look at them as being parasites and kind of leeching off these rich. But also you can look at it the other way, where the rich family is a parasite in terms of the labor, right? So these rich folks don't wash their own dishes, can't wash their own wash their own laundry, make themselves food. So they leech off the poor family's labor, right? Like they can't even do simple tasks for themselves. They just order these people around to do things for them, drive them around and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of a dual meaning title. A lot of people think it just is for the poor family, but it's really not. It's really a commentary on both families in the film. First South Korean film to win the Palme d'Or. So it also won. It was the first foreign language film to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. So that had never been done before as well, and this film did it. Had a budget of about $15.5 million, which is a decent sized budget, but really not that large in today's standards. And it grossed about $250 million worldwide, so it had a pretty good box office success. And again, like I've mentioned, it's pretty critically acclaimed. Some people call this one of the best films of all time. The director, Bong Joon-ho, so been around a fairly long time and has directed a handful of films. Really is particular about the work that he does and the way he goes about doing his work. In college, he's a director, producer, and a screenwriter, right? He partakes in all of it. I believe he has co-writing credit on Parasite. In college, he actually studied sociology, so that's one of the things that we've seen kind of as a pattern through a lot of the directors we've looked at. They didn't actually go in studying film as their first choice of what I want to do with my life. They kind of came to film a little bit later, and it's actually a good way to go about storytelling, is just coming at it from different angles. We had an architect as a director. Again, we have a sociology major, somebody who studied poetry, I believe. A few different directors, right? So one of the things that you'll I haven't talked much about, but if you enjoy this process and breaking down movies, maybe making movies might be something that you might be interested in. And I had a lot of people telling me early on, hey, why don't you go study something that's got a little bit more stable career path? But I ended up sticking through it, found work in the film industry, worked as a camera assistant and a camera operator and a cinematographer for 11, 12 years in the film industry, and had a fantastic time doing it, and left it because I wanted to change and wanted to do something different. It wasn't like I was forced out and couldn't find work or whatever. So it can be done. You just got to have the work ethic and the know-how, right? You got to acquire the skills. So if this is something that interests you, you might want to look into filmmaking at Santa Ana. We have classes. I teach a class called DM102, which is kind of a introductory course to the filmmaking process. So check that out if it's something that you're interested in. When he was in college, he started a film club which kind of is what led him towards cinema. And he was also very like politically active, right? He was part of a pro-democracy movement in South Korea, and he often went to protests and was in these protests with clashes with law enforcement and things like that. Just was very like was a participant in the political kind of arena a little bit at this level, and when he was in college. Some of his influences are other great filmmakers, right? Guillermo del Toro. He's got a film that's out currently. I believe it's called Nightmare Alley, which is fantastic. He made Pan's Labyrinth. The Shape of Water is another one of his, I believe. Martin Scorsese is just a big-time filmmaker. He's done a million different things. There's a Japanese filmmaker, Nagisa Oshima, I think. Kind of a not controversial, but just makes some pretty interesting work in Japan. Most people go to Akira Kurosawa when they talk Japan, but this is another outstanding director. And then Alfred Hitchcock, who's a classic American director that did stuff that was in the thrillers, kind of sort of horror-ish, but more thriller-ish. Some of his trademarks, like some of the things that you see in his work that is always going on. There's always sudden tone shifts, even within scenes, and like switching from like drama to like very darkness, or like comedy, like slapstick comedy, switching to like a darker comedy within the same scene, right? So those are things that you'll see, and you'll see that in this film. Actually, the tone of things kind of switches pretty quickly, sometimes from scene to scene or even within a scene. Only shoots what he needs, doesn't believe in traditional coverage. So we talked about coverage a few modules back, where we're talking about getting a bunch of different angles of the same scene, so that when you go to editing, you have a bunch of different options when you want to cut, right? Well, he just wants to shoot what he knows he needs, and then he's going to just cut that together, which runs him into some issues, which we'll talk about later, but it does kind of get you into, it could back you into some corners, but he's definitely known for working that way. He doesn't do traditional coverage. And he also is really interested, he doesn't really like the term directing actors. He believes his goal or his job is to kind of make the actors feel comfortable, and he lets them do what they want to do with the character, even to the point where he encourages improvisation within scenes. So when you're watching the acting in this movie, you know, it's a lot of what the actors think and what they want to do with the character that they're playing. Okay, he's directed 7 films. And he's also known for working with a lot of the same actors. He's got about 10 or 12 actors that have been in 3 or 4 or 5 of his movies. So he definitely uses the same actor. I know the guy who plays the dad in the Kim family in this movie has been in several of his movies previously. The narrative of this film. Okay, so the story is kind of about a poverty-stricken family who cunningly places themselves in the service of this wealthy family just to kind of get a little bit of a taste of the good life, right? So this film kind of looks at that, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I don't want to give too much away because there's lots of twists and turns in this movie. If you've never seen it, I don't want any spoilers, so I'm going to try to keep it pretty vague as to how I talk about this. As the family kind of infiltrates this rich family, there's definitely some dark secrets that get revealed, and there's definitely a couple great twists in the film. Themes that they explore in this film: social injustice, class inequities, and capitalist greed, right? Just never having enough and always wanting more. And again, the one thing that really stands out is just classism or class inequities, like the disparity between the rich and the poor, and that's kind of a big commentary that he's making with this whole film. And that's where it gets a little satirical, which we'll talk about in a second. In my opinion, the big house, the wealthy family house, which I believe the family's name is the Parks, their house is like an additional character in the film. Okay, so just look for kind of how this house kind of plays a big role in how the story plays out. The story, again, moves from funny to unsettling to heartbreaking to tragic, like all the way through the film. Like, it just changes kind of its tone and what it's all about and what you're thinking, even from scene to scene. So it's very well done. It's very well written, and the visual style of this film is fantastic. Some people say that, again, this is kind of a satirical comedy, or it has a satirical nature. So what's satire, right? What is that, right? It's a kind of cinema that's been around for a long time. There's a lot of satirical comedy in the United States. And it's really just the use of humor or exaggeration to expose and criticize people's stupidity, particularly in the context of contemporary politics, right? And other topical issues, right? So some big American films that are a little bit older, but definitely satirical, would be stuff like Dr. Strangelove is a classic satirical kind of comedy. Little Big Man is another one with Dustin Hoffman that's kind of satirical in its approach. So the whole idea of just kind of making fun of and just poking fun of and be over exaggerating political issues. There's another one that's out right now called Don't Look Up, and it's kind of a political satire. So those are the styles. That's what political satire is when you're talking about cinema. So there's a good reference point. The cinematography in this film, fantastic, right? A lot of it stems from director Bong Joon-ho, but the director and the cinematographer worked closely to kind of create this look, right? It had a 124-day shooting schedule, which is pretty long, and that's partially because he's so meticulous. One of the other things that is a big Bong Joon-ho process is that he doesn't like to use practical locations. So a practical location is a location that already exists. Like you go into a neighborhood and you find a house that's already there and you ask them if you can rent their house to shoot their movie just using practical locations, right? He doesn't like to do that. He likes to build film sets to specifically fit the need that he has, right? So again, the house that you're going to see, the yard and then the first level of the house were actually built on a plot of land that they picked out, right? It didn't exist, it wasn't there, and they built it for the film. And several times the cinematographer and the director went to the location and watched the path of the sun over the course of the day so that they could figure out exactly where to place this house and where to put it so that they could use the sunlight in the film, right, in this house. And then the second level of the house and the rest of the locations, the lower level apartment and the basement level and all that good stuff, were built on a sound stage so that they could, again, have very a large control over the situation and what was going on and the lighting and all that good stuff. The film uses a large format camera. So the whole idea of using large format, it's an Alexa 65. That's the name of the camera. What it allows you to do is it gives you a bigger field of view, even when you go to tight shots, right? So you can go to a close-up shot of a person, but you can still see a lot of the set behind them, and you can include other people in the frame. And that's what you get when you shoot wide format cinematography. So it really lets the surrounding area, again, in this case, a lot of times it's the house, be an additional like character in your movie. So look for the wide aspect ratio, and again, notice the fact that we can get some close-ups of people's faces, get the camera up close, but we can also see a lot of the background. That's pretty big because, again, sunlight and lack of sunlight, how much access you have to sunlight is one of like the visual metaphors that he uses in the film when you're comparing the poor to the rich, right? The poor have to use artificial light and the rich have access to all this natural sunlight coming in the house. So they needed to make sure that they showed that, and they also had to plan out where this house was built so that the sun could be used correctly, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the visual symbolism and the metaphors. There's a video in the contextual page that really gets into kind of the visual style and the metaphors and symbolism that's used in the film. It's a fantastic video. You may want to watch it after you watch the film. It's up to you. You can watch it before, you can watch it after. It's up to you, but it does kind of like reveal some stuff. But maybe if you watch the film and then you go back and look at that contextual video, it's the second video on the page, it'll kind of highlight some things for you, okay? One of the things that we look at visual style wise is we're always looking down on the Kim family and up at the Park family, right? Even to where they live, like the Kim family kind of lives below ground, like they're below the trash level, right? And the Parks live up. You have to walk up this little walkway to get up to their house, and the sky is there and there's green and the sunlight hitting you. It's very dominant, kind of looking up and looking down in the visual aspect. And then again, talking about the sunlight, which we just hit on. So look for those elements in the cinematography when you're watching this film. It's very stylish, it's very well done, fantastic visual film. The acting performance had a large cast, right, of important characters. I think there's about 10 of them that are really important, and you gotta kind of follow the storyline of all of them. And also, remember that Bong Joon-ho does not like to direct. He doesn't want to tell the actors what they need to do. He gives a lot of freedom to the actors. So when you're watching the performances, you are watching a lot of the individual actors and their interpretation of what their character is about and the motivation of their character. So it's pretty impressive to watch. The Kim family is kind of a family. It's a family of 4. It's a family of anti-heroes. So we've looked at the anti-hero before back in the Spaghetti Western for sure. And I think there's a couple other spots we've looked at anti-heroes. So just understand that, again, when you're watching it, it's like you you shouldn't be rooting for these people, but you can't help but root for them because they definitely are the anti-hero. And so again, just check that out and just understand that these actors put a lot of work into these characters because the director lets them do that. Editing. So editing the film is a little bit tricky, again, because the director does not shoot traditional coverage, right? So sometimes you're going to back yourself into a corner where you have a take of a shot and that take works for part of it, but doesn't work for the whole shot, right? And so you have multiple takes of these same shots. And so what they would do sometimes is they would have to stitch shots together. So stitching is kind of a special effect where you put 2 shots together that aren't actually together and you make it look like it's one shot when it isn't. And it's not really using a transition, kind of like if you were looking at Slumdog Millionaire or The Last Emperor, where they were transitioning from one time period to another and they were doing transitions. Slumdog Millionaire did some creative ones. Those are transitions. A stitch is supposed to look like hidden, like we don't actually see the transition actually happen. And so they found themselves having to do this in certain shots where they would use the beginning of one take and maybe the end of another take. Same shot, but they had to use different takes based on performance. And they had to put this stitch in and make it look like there wasn't a cut there. So that's a technique that gets used. It's pretty traditional today. It's pretty common because of special effects. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this film in the post-production end, they actually released and produced a black and white version. I know there's a typo in there. Sorry, it says whiter, but it's white. They produced a black and white version of this film, which I don't know how it would play. I'd like to see it in black and white just to kind of see, but they only released it in certain places. But I think color is such an important element to this movie, so I wonder how it would play out in black and white. Although the other thing that might become more evident in the black and white version is kind of how light is working, right? So we don't see the color of the light, but we can definitely feel like the natural sunlight compared to the artificial light indoors, and that might kind of stand out more in a black and white version, right? Because color can't be an influence for you. So that'd be interesting, and I thought that was interesting that they released a black and white version, but that isn't what we saw in the United States. Sound design. They had a very well-known composer. There's no shot I'm getting that name right. It's mostly made up of the whole soundtrack, minimalist piano pieces, right? And then when they need to add intensity, they use a light percussion, right? When they want to kind of make the tension kind of known, they're using that kind of sound trigger to kind of get everybody to know that, hey, the music's changing, something intense is about to happen. Okay, so just look for that. Pretty simple soundtrack, but really effective in helping tell this story. Finally, our cinematic terms. We have satire, which again is kind of exaggerating situations to make fun of people and how their stupidity when it comes to kind of political situations or topical situations in the culture. Practical locations versus film sets. So a practical location is an actual location that already exists, and then we take it over and turn it into a film set, or building a set so that we have ultimate control as filmmakers. Practical locations typically provide more authenticity, but when you have a $15 million budget, you can make it pretty authentic, right? Large format camera. So they shot this on a pretty wide camera. So Alexa 65, remember that. So remember I talked about how the standard film is 35. So Alexa 65 has a viewing image twice as large as that. So it's a widescreen big movie, so we can see more of the background even though we're getting close-up shots of people's faces. So look for that and how it plays out as you watch the movie. And then the editing term, a stitch, which is combining 2 shots together but trying to make it look like there is no edit there. So that's what a stitch is. So look for that. Those are our terms. Again, I hope you enjoy the film. Take care. Good luck with everything. We'll talk soon.